But why is this happening? Before we kind of just blanketly just say this is communism, this is the end, let's kind of take a bigger picture. Let's zoom out. Yesterday, I mentioned somebody I heavily follow, Predictive History, that channel on YouTube, talked about the fall of civilizations, right? No civilization lasts forever, right? Whether it's the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, even the Egyptian Empire prior to that, even the British Empire. British Empire died basically at the end of World War II when it entered a war and became bankrupted by that war. A lot of people are speculating that the American Empire will collapse. All these signs are already there. We're basically on a downward slope of the fall of the American Empire. As an American, I don't like to hear that. We're here to just react to the news, the market, and the reality. Right? We're here to be very objective with the data and the facts. And facts are capitalism has completely just kind of gone off the rails. Hey, crypto family, we are back. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully this live stream goes a little smoother. So we're still doing the two setups, Riverside and Pump.fun. What a day. It's been 24 hours since the first stream on Pump. I had no idea this platform was this fire. All right, so let's put out the alert, let people know we are live. All right, just give me a few minutes here. Questioning myself if I believe it though. No longer question if I'm really a believer though. Now you should take into account that my account can build my league. Take into account I must account for what I really think. Being in the space I learned to see. I'll only ever make what every day I can't believe I gotta go. This the only life I know. I believe it in my mind, so I know it's time to show. This never take no L, so I stay with these so long. Never take no L, so the team with me, oh. Never take no L, so I stay as he grows. Just landed on the moon in the Lambo, taking pictures with the zoom and the angle. Hello everybody, we'll be starting soon. Just give me a few more minutes. Just landed on the moon in the Lambo, taking pictures with the zoom and the angle. We'll be coming back to you with the same pose. Stations coming soon with a halo. All right, so we're streaming live on Pump. For some reason, the other platforms are not working, so we're just gonna go all in on Pump for today. Let me see if I can share my screen here. I've not done this before on Pump. Oh, wow, all right. That was easy. All right, hello world. TM Live is officially live on Pump.fun. What a day. Had no idea this would blow up this fast. For those who are not familiar, we did our first live stream ever on Pump. We've been streaming for years, streaming for almost a decade, on and off, not consistently, maybe like every few weeks to a month. But we said, hey, you know what? Pump's blowing up. Let's add that as an extra channel. And it has blown up more than 1 million. I think what, 1.8 million daily trading volume on our Pump token, a coin. You have to create a coin to stream. But anyway, gonna make this a little quick. Just kind of want to go straight into the analysis. A big day in New York. As somebody who used to live in New York City, it's pretty huge actually. Let me just do this over here. All right, so I used to live in New York City. I've lived there for about 1.5 years. I'm from the DMV, DC, and Maryland. Went to school in DC. Grew up in the East Coast pretty much my whole life. Tail end of COVID, moved to Austin, Texas. I've been here ever since then, but we're scaling up in New York City. That is a hub for our team. So I moved there basically half the year, had a place in Austin. And I love New York, nothing like New York City. New York City is the best. But eventually met somebody, fell in love, got married, moved back to Austin full time. But it's crazy seeing that New York City is now officially, as of yesterday, the mayor of New York City is a communist. What does that mean for New York City? What does that mean for capitalism in the US? What does that mean for crypto? Because obviously we are a crypto focused channel. So all this is just crazy, right? So we're here today to kind of go through all this. Now let me just actually move this out of the way. Just give me 1 second here. I want to make sure I can see the chat box full screen. So I'm going to just set up my monitors a little different. All right, so, and then the chat box. All right, so, sorry, just give me a second. All right, we have 65 people on the stream. on pump.fun. If you're watching this elsewhere, I would just honestly just move to pump.fun. That's going to become the next, the hub for our live streams. Seems to be the platform that's basically doing the most. All right, sorry, what I was trying to do did not quite work. So let's hop straight into the stream. Be sure to go to tokenmetrics.com, sign up, create an account. We're basically an analytics-driven platform that helps you find alpha in crypto by giving you trading signals. On the last stream, I mentioned how the market has shifted. The fundamentals have shifted. Fundamentals do not matter, unlike past cycles. What matters more is finding the hot narrative, trading that narrative, and moving on to the next thing. The only thing you want to accumulate are stores of value. Bitcoin, ETH, Sol, and maybe new projects that have new fundamentals in the sense of they're taking a portion of funds and buying back their token. And the 2-disc cycle have been hyper liquid, Hype. In the last 30 days, Hype did $100 million in on-chain revenue, while Pump.fun, what we're streaming now, did $40 million in on-chain revenue. And they're getting all this capital and putting it back into their ecosystem, into buying back the token. So basically numbers go up, right? What does that mean? Hype is taking 97% of funds, buying back the token. We did an experiment on Pump.fun. We got like about 10K in one day from one stream, which is pretty wild. But if they're making 40 million a month, even in the bottom of this bear market, that's pretty wild. All right, but let's kind of hop straight into the big news. Right, this is kind of what we covered today's webinar for our customers. This is from NPR, but pretty much any media outlet in the US is covering this. Mamdani wins New York City mayor race in a historic victory for progressives. What does this mean, right? He's actually Ugandan, a fellow Ugandan, came to the US back in 1997 when I was 8 years old. Although he's Ugandan, we have completely different perspectives on policy. I'm a capitalist, hence why I'm in crypto and trading and investing. Also run a venture fund. And he's a socialist. But why is this happening? Before we kind of just blanketly just say this is communism, this is the end, let's kind of take a bigger picture. Let's zoom out. Yesterday, I mentioned somebody I heavily follow, Predictive History, that channel on YouTube, talked about the fall of civilizations, right? No civilization lasts forever, right? Whether it's the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, even the Egyptian Empire prior to that, even the British Empire. British Empire died basically at the end of World War II when it entered a war and became bankrupted by that war, right? So that's happened with British Empire, but a lot of people are speculating that the American Empire will collapse. And he also posits the same thing, saying basically the early signs are already there. We're basically on a downward slope of the fall of the American Empire. As an American, I don't like to hear that, but we're not here to talk about what we hope happens. We're here to just react to the news, the market, and the reality. Right? We're here to be very objective with the data and the facts. And facts are capitalism has completely just kind of gone off the rails. I'm a capitalist. I love capitalism. But for the average person, people are not making money. They're not making money at all, right? The inequality of wealth is completely through the roof. And what does it look like? Basically, the rich or the top 1% of the 1% keep on getting richer and richer and richer. Objectively, we can look at this by the number of billionaires. I think I saw something yesterday saying in the 80s, there were very few billionaires, like maybe like 10 or so billionaires. Don't quote me on that, but basically, there are very few billionaires. Now we're here in 2025, at the end of 2025, and there are over 1,000 billionaires. So there's been a big explosion in financial wealth. And how's that wealth happening? It's happening through financial speculation. It's happening through basically fugazi, as we call it, right? Financial engineering, right? People are speculating. People are not even speculating anymore in the spot asset. They're able to speculate on basically something made up out of complete air, right? Derivatives, perps, as we see in crypto, right? Like, for example, in crypto, you don't have to buy spot Bitcoin, ETH, or altcoin anymore. You can literally just make up anything using oracles and trade them and just make sure you have enough money to factor in for losses. But this was happening on Wall Street before crypto, right? Basically, derivatives and all this have allowed people to trade and speculate on just about anything. And the natural progression of this leads into prediction markets being the next big thing, where you're not just betting on financial instruments, you're betting on anything. It could be just even a mention on stocks or on TV or a sports game. It's literally the peak. It's like the peak or top of pure speculation and fugazi and financial instruments. But why are we in a world where people have to speculate on this? Because people have given up on the notion of being able to basically earn an honest wage. The wage gap has just been getting wider and wider and wider. And this leads to people just kind of giving up, right? But this notion is covered heavily on the channel Predictive History. If you just go to his YouTube, type in, it's actually two concepts. One is called rat utopia. And let me see if I can find this real quick. And then just give me 1 second here. Let me also make sure I'm getting the messages here. All right, yeah, I can see the chat. Okay, so all right, let me just find the right website here. I did try to do a little prep. Okay, I'm not quite finding it, but I'll kind of speak to it, right? So this is a post from Chamath. This is actually from today, but this is actually referring to an email from Peter Thiel to Zuck of Facebook back in January 2020. And basically, to kind of go through this at a high level, there are many themes that could be developed more, as Peter tells Mark, but he's saying he would be the last person to advocate for socialism. Right? But when 70% of millennials say they are pro-socialist, this is back in 2020, January 2020. But the reason why people are heavily skewing towards socialism, especially those people who are on the outside looking in, comes from the notion called rat utopia. This is a famous experiment done by some professor. Just go online, type in rat utopia. That's actually what I was trying to find on Google. Just go straight to google.com. Yeah, so this experiment was done in the mid 20th century. But really, it's a concept of when you have, they took mice, put them in an experiment, basically put them in a cage, and they just kind of studied them over the course of time. And they realized that no matter what was being done, the mice always ended up kind of just attacking each other. Right? It doesn't matter how happy they were, they ended up attacking each other. And it basically came down to positing this theory saying rats, which is then applied towards humans, basically partake in these social status games, right? In these games where there's a hierarchy, right? When you have different generations of rats, think great-grandfathers, parents, and kids, if they're confined in a place where there's no ability for them to leave and basically move out, right? And there's a cap or a finite amount of positions of status within that environment, they eventually have to attack, to fight for that status, right? Basically, it just means it turns into Games of Thrones. And typically what happens is the young end up having to revolt against older generations, right? Because the older generations refuse to retire. They refuse to give up their status, right? And this same thing also applies into this other concept called the elite overproduction, right? This is what creates basically bureaucracies. What does that mean? For example, if you go to, I think I can take the Ivy League, for example, right? In the past, the rich, the top 1%, they knew they could just go into an Ivy League school and they would be good for life, right? But what happens when these slots that normally were just for the Ivy League were going to Americans and they're just competing with the people in the US? What happens when they have to now compete with people globally, people across the whole world, right? Not just people in the US, people in China, people in Europe, right? So imagine you only had, this is just to make an example, 1,000 slots available in an Ivy League school and 10,000 people competing for those slots. If that then escalates to a point where it's 1,000 slots and you have 1 million people competing for those slots, guess what? You have people who are still normally in the elite, still qualified, who are basically out of luck, right? So when you have too many elite fighting over a finite amount of positions, it creates this elite overproduction. And what happens is any civilization, any revolution, typically it's not the people at the lower end of the hierarchy or status that end up actually revolting. Typically, it's people who used to belong at the top of society in terms of status that were then displaced due to not having enough positions of status, to the point that they then use their knowledge, their connections, their network to try and overthrow the current establishment elite, right? To really create a revolution, right? So that's basically the concept of wrapped utopia and the concept of elite overproduction being applied towards the current state we're in. What does that mean, right? Just look at the economy. The top 1% are getting richer. Everybody else is getting poorer, right? The US dollar inflation is going up. People are losing their purchasing power. People who are graduating college are jobless at crazy levels that haven't been seen before. Not just people in regular college, even people in Ivy Leagues. I think I saw something saying 40% or more of Ivy League graduates are unemployed. Right? So you have those people looking at the current system, and they end up basically plotting and scheming to overthrow the current system because it's failed them. So let me pull up one of the things I wanted to kind of pull up here. I think it was a Substack. The concept is also called sometimes downward mobility, right? Basically, it's a restructuring of society as a whole, where basically people who are normally at the top, people who are basically called elites, when they lose their status, when they become downwardly mobile, they fight back by trying to overthrow the establishment. But let me try to find this. Okay, so let's share this again. Yeah, so here we're looking at, this chart kind of sums it up, right? It's showing one in green, the well-being of society, basically. And then also the overproduction of the elite, right? So as we have too many elite, right? And then there's not enough positions for the elite, the well-being of society decreases, right? And why the concept or that experiment of wrapped utopia was pretty eye-opening, because in most society, the elite, the people who've worked hard, think like grandparents, they normally pass off their wealth and their status to future generations. But when you have people who, not the best example, but take, for example, Warren Buffett, a billionaire, one of the richest people in the world, living till 90, working till 90, or if you even take politics, for example, right? You have politicians, like Biden was president of the US in his 80s. Trump is, I believe, in his 80s too, or close to it. In normal society, people retire. Retirement age of in the US is actually 65 years old. But if people refuse to retire, then those positions that would normally go to future generations, they're holding on to those positions of power, of status, and wealth, accumulating more wealth. If you read all the research on this concept of elite overproduction and wrapped utopia, basically, long story short, TLDR is the boomer generations and these older generations are one of the most selfish generations of all time, because they made a lot of money, they've accumulated a lot of power, and they refuse to give it up. Right? Obviously, we're not here for charity. We're not here to, I'm just kind of speaking the facts, but it creates this whole unrest socially, right? Which leads to the young generations who are unemployed at levels never seen before, are not able to afford purchasing homes. They have a lot of college debt. So they look at this system of capitalism and they say, you know what, this does not make any sense at all. It is completely out of the window. And that's what happens. That's how you end up with Mamdani, basically a communist, becoming the mayor of the biggest city in the US. Okay, let's see how we're doing here in the comments. All right, how are we doing here? Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'm checking the live chat. I believe I locked it to just token holders. So only those who have the token, the TM Live token or coin can actually submit questions. So that should hopefully filter out some of the bots. Deck screener, yeah, we handled deck screener. That should be handled. Yeah, so that's been handled. It's being processed. Yeah, the YouTube stream is not working, but don't worry, I'm also recording this, so we'll upload this to YouTube. But so far, it's probably going to be our main platform for streaming until otherwise.